I've seen a lot of criticism of Elon Musk's handling of Twitter, and I have some of it myself, but I think there's a component to the story that a lot of people are leaving out. And it's actually analogous to both the Biden and Obama administrations. So, when Barack Obama became president and when Joe Biden became president, there was suddenly an influx of illegal migrants. All of a sudden, a bunch of people had it in their heads that the US was open, that they could come, and they came in droves. Millions of people attempted to get into the US simply because Spanish language misinformation, alongside an onslaught of right wing media, all spreading the same message at the same time, which was that liberal administrations are weak on immigration and the border is open, you can just stroll on through. And I think what's going on with bots and neo Nazis on Twitter is actually a similar case. Is there an extent to which Elon has actually done a bad job on moderation, on fighting the bots? Yes, there is an extent to which that is the case. But I think it's limited. And I think primarily the reason why we're seeing this spike in bots and in hate speech is not for any particular policy decision by Twitter, but instead because there is such an onslaught of information stating that Twitter is open, there's no moderation, come do your scam here, come spread your crazy ideas here. There are still people who get banned on Twitter for inciting violence, for having white supremacist views. It still occurs, even though the algorithm has been changed in a way that favors those people with the introduction of the blue checkmark system, which is overwhelmingly going to be paid for by far-right people because they like Elon Musk. So to that end, the algorithm has been changed. The algorithm has also just naturally been changed to favor those people. Me and many other people suddenly started seeing a whole bunch of far-right accounts, even that ones that weren't verified, on Twitter, in our Twitter feeds, even though we never responded or liked any content like that whatsoever. But if you like even a few posts from that wormhole, you'll see all of a sudden like mostly those types of opinions. And so he has tuned the algorithm to favor these people to some extent. I think that's undeniable. But that being said, people still get banned on the site for those views. People still get censored on the site for particularly extreme expressions of those views. It is just not to the same extent, I think partially because there are so many people on the website now who are openly expressing those things because there's a media apparatus that's gone out there and said, Twitter is open for business. Come say your hate speech. Wow, isn't this so bad? In the same way that they've said stuff like this when Obama was in office and when Biden was in office in regards to immigration. The U.S. is open for business. Come do your crimes here. The border is opened. It's the same shit. In reality, you could always incite violence on Twitter. You could always have far-right talking points on Twitter. You just couldn't tweet the N-word at CNN a million times. That would get you banned. But I'll tell you, you can still get banned if you do that, and you can still get banned if you express these things in particularly prominent ways if they're bad enough. And so I think the extent to which it's changed has been exaggerated. It's not like he hasn't changed it to favor the far right. He has. It's not like he hasn't elevated far right voices in his own Twitter feed by retweeting them, by replying to them, by doing Twitter spaces with them. He has. But, once again, I just want to be clear on this. the extent to which this is the case has been exaggerated. And I think that is because there's so much media surrounding Twitter now that's saying it's total anarchy, it's the Wild West, you can say and do whatever you want. You're going to have a lot of people flocking to Twitter who would have never been on Twitter to do exactly that, whatever they want, to be in the Wild West. Much in the same way that when you had the media attacking Obama for his non-existent laissez-faire border policies, or in other words, criticizing him for opening the border when he actually hadn't, there were all of a sudden way more people coming to the border that could have gone over the border anyway during any other administration. They simply chose to under Obama because the media was attacking him constantly for these supposed laissez-faire border policies that didn't actually exist. And the same is being done with Biden. He has continued the vast majority of Trump's hawkish border policies, constructing the rest of the wall, trying to keep Title 42 and remain in Mexico, which are illegal under international law. He has fought tooth and nail to keep those things in place, even though he campaigned saying that he wouldn't. He's done all this stuff, and yet millions upon millions of people have come to the border to come to the United States because there's a hell of a lot of disinformation that's in their native language, and in English, mind you, from Fox in particular, that has claimed the border is opened. And you see this border chaos as a result of the system that already existed at the border, which was a bad one, an ineffective one that does not properly address the situation on the ground. And also, this is sort of getting off topic, but also, ends up attracting a lot of people from the countries that we destabilize. But that's neither here nor there. If you look at Elon Musk's Twitter, there is a media environment surrounding it, claiming that it's the Wild West much in the same way. Claiming that if you're far right, if you incite violence, you can get off scot-free. So there's more people doing it. But there's still also people getting banned. Whenever something got recalled in the United States, particularly in my local community, something that affected my state and the supermarkets that I go to, I used to have a sigh of relief. And that was because most of the time, the eggs and poultry that were affected by, be it an outbreak of salmonella or something else, wouldn't affect me. And the reason was because I was primarily eating processed and canned, non-fresh food. I was eating the cheapest stuff possible. And even what I have before me, which is turkey with pasta sauce and spaghetti noodles, even what I have before me is a relatively cheap meal, but it would have been seen as, way beyond my means not too long ago. I'm doing much better financially now than I used to be, so I can actually afford to cook my own meals, and that is how I eat the majority of my meals. But when things like the salmonella outbreaks or the outbreaks of swine flu or what have you would happen, I would always have this sigh of relief because it would never affect me. And it wasn't just when the news would hit that I would have that sigh of relief and think, well, it won't affect me. It was also when those outbreaks weren't happening, right up to the moment when they were about to happen, and then after. I would be thinking about this and going, man, to look on the bright side, in this situation where I can't afford good food, at least I'm not being affected by the things that seem to affect people who can afford fresh food. That's what I was thinking. And now it's interesting to look back on that because I have substantially less anxiety than I used to. Nowadays, I don't care, but I remember what it was like being that person. And so when I go to the supermarket and I pick out fresh food and I think about who I used to be, that person who was always told, no, you can't have that, it's too expensive, no, we can't cook this, that, or the other because the ingredients are too expensive. I think about that person trying to look on the bright side and then thinking, well, at least I'm not going to catch salmonella, at least I'm not going to catch swine flu or bird flu or what have you. I think about that person, and while I'm not that person anymore, I'm still inextricably tied to them, because their thoughts will still run through my mind when I'm at the grocery store. The difference is, those thoughts don't control me, and ultimately I'm able to enjoy meals like this at ease, because statistically speaking, these things are incredibly rare events, and if it's going to affect you, you will know that it's going to affect you quite quickly. Like, there are so few people who are actually impacted by these events. When they do transpire, recalls happen pretty quick, and very few people actually buy infected or tainted products. So it was a total misnomer on my part, but it was nonetheless one that would run through my mind, and on some level, I think, provide me some comfort. So recently, I've been working with a therapist who has devised a number of coping strategies for me to actually get through school. And as a result of the positive reinforcement and coping skills from said therapist, as well as my own effort and the effort of my wife, I have devised a plan to start all the way back from the beginning on my schooling, particularly with arithmetic, which is what I really struggle with. Based on a schedule that I have to abide by each day, that my wife holds me to. Having her physically living with me is a great help for that, I'll tell you. That she holds me to and helps me with during the scheduled hours of the day where I actually study. So a lot of what I'm working on is stuff I vaguely remember, but once again, I'm going all the way back from the beginning until I work my way up through the grades enough that I will be at a point where I can understand the fundamentals that go into the GED test. And when I can take that test, or rather when I can take the practice tests enough times to be confident enough to take the tests, I will then pass the test. And when I then pass the test, I can move on to thinking about SATs for entrance into college, or perhaps getting into a college that doesn't necessarily require results on that. Some don't, some do. It really depends. I don't know a lot about how college entrance works, but that's like the long-term goal. Is ground zero is going through the stuff that I vaguely remember and brushing up on that, getting a good sense for it, going on to the stuff that I don't know and building on that foundational knowledge little by little, more and more each day, to finally be able to practice for the GED to a point where I'm confident at it and actually get it done. And from there, I can go off to school and get a degree for a job that will actually be fulfilling for me, that I actually want to do. And so it's slow. It's actually faster than I expected it to be, but it's slow. But that's okay. I feel good about what I'm doing. I'm making progress. I am doing well. And as long as I continue on this schedule and I continue to have people holding me to that schedule, which I do, and I continue working with my doctor, I think I have a pretty good chance at this thing. And I think that's probably the best news that I've had since I got married. You know, getting with Sophia and getting married, this was the best news that I had, and of course on this channel I've shared it constantly. But this is the best news recently, you know, that's come out recently. And it's helped with my mental health quite a lot, because having been a NEET for so many years now, I've become intricately aware of the fact that it is not a sustainable way to live your life in the long term. You have to have hard fun. You have to have things that are just hard, things that are just difficult, that force your brain to work, that force you to work. I don't know why, but it seems as though we as human beings just kind of desire that. Like, we just kind of have an intuitive drive for that. And when we placate those desires, we end up feeling a lot better overall. And I've found that to be the case with myself. But that was not something I ended up realizing until living this sort of jobless, educationless, hedonistic lifestyle for so long that I'd end up looking myself in the mirror so many times and go, you know, what the hell is going on? Until eventually I looked at myself in the mirror one day and realized, oh, you know, I want something more than this. I want something other than this. And so you can break free from the hedonistic treadmill. You don't have to be running on the hamster wheel every single day of your life, you know. You can choose something better for yourself. But it's hard. It's hard, but it's worthwhile. And that's what I'm doing, and it's all in service of working toward that broader goal, that broader notion, which is me having a happier and more fulfilling life, which is me waking up every day to do something that I want to do, that I can progress at, that I can work at, that isn't just manual labor or service labor or something menial and boring such as that, something soul-crushing such as that. Yeah, so small steps, big steps, but steps in the right direction nonetheless.